Spock, McCoy, can't go wrong. Awesome stuff. The Paramount gates were pretty cool walking through those. And now we're going to talk to a pretty cool man. He's Eric Peters. Welcome, Eric, and thank you. You were right on the money, man. You got the link. You're in. And I hope that our staff here in the back room treated you very, very well.
Of course they did. They even sent me supper.
You know, it's funny. I was biting into a chocolate like last winter, and it had been in my car, and it was kind of frozen, and it caused like one of those weird disconnects in your jaw. So every once in a while, when I go to laugh or I do something, it sort of clicks, and it hasn't healed up properly all the way. So that actually reminds me. And you know, peanut butter. I love peanut butter. I love peanut butter so much, and I haven't had peanut butter in so long because of the weird long COVID thing and stuff like that. But you know what I started to have was I got sunflower butter, and it's really good. It's a lot like peanut butter, and you can get chocolate and stuff like that. So I put that on like some, I can't even have real toast. I have like fake toast made out of like rice wheat or rice.
Oh, is it
rice.
the Jesus bread, the Ezekiel bread?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what's in it. I think they use
It tastes like drywall, basically.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, this actually isn't all that bad. This is pretty good stuff, but it's super expensive, you know. But oh boy, you got me going there, man. Oh, way to go! Thank you, and welcome to the show, Eric. Live long and prosper. Whether it's off Jif peanut butter or anything else, man, just keep living long and prospering. How you doing?
Coffee, right? It's the manna of the gods.
Yes.
Aren't we in this kind of weird trough right now? Notice how everything's sort of gotten weirdly quiet with regard to what's going on in Iran.
I have not really discussed it too much on the program, but when I've been up in the kitchen, like making my lunch, trying to prepare for the show, I've sort of gotten into that state where I'm sort of saying to myself, either people are in that trough where there's not there's sort of a stasis moment here, or maybe people are on vacation, or they don't want to talk anymore about the warfare stuff. But I thought, then that made me redouble my efforts. I said, no, man, keep going, as I'm chopping up the carrots. You know, I was like, keep going, go strong. But I get the same vibe as you, and I want to avoid it myself, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to Colonel Doug McGregor earlier today, and I consider him to be a pretty solid source. He's a guy with a lot of gravitas, a lot of experience. And he also knows Trump. You know, he worked with Trump in the first Trump administration.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
I think his insight is pretty valuable. And his position is basically that it's checkmate, you know, for us right now, the United States. You know, the Iranians have essentially said, we're done dealing with Trump. We're done even participating in the pretense of any kinds of negotiations until it's a prerequisite, until our demands are met, you know, because they won the war, right?
Exactly. And the amazing thing is, as I mentioned at the start of the show, the rhetoric from the Bessents and the Huckabees and the Trumpers is, well, we can wait all we want. We'll just keep waiting. We'll keep waiting. It's a war of attrition. It's not a problem. It's like, you don't understand. You're attriting the rest of the world's availability to get fuel and all sorts of stuff. And the Iranians are ready to hunker down. They're cool about it. They're fine. They're going to keep going.
Point, which I think is on the money, is it's a question of who can hold out the longest, us or the Iranians.
Exactly.
And his argument is the Iranians can hold out longer.
Exactly.
You know, if indeed they're drawing down the last reserves that are there to cushion the supply chain interruptions, and it's not just the oil. This is really important to understand.
Right.
There are a lot of other materials that are being prevented from leaving that area. You know, they're talking now about, you know, a pipeline to get around the closure. Well, that's fine. Let's say that they did that. You know, it's not going to do anything about other things like helium, for example, and sulfur, and you know, other constituent components of the modern industrial world, without which things are going to come to a screeching halt very soon. And, you know, that brings up a kind of alarming question. Like, okay, so what's Trump going to do at this point? You know, I think that he's faced with the prospect of looking like a loser, you know, and all of these really horrible potential repercussions are kind of come home to roost this fall, just in time for the midterms. Yeah. And potentially it could be a real debacle. And of course, the Israelis are kind of quiescent too. We don't see much of Netanyahu anymore. You know, it just seems to like, oh, you know, it just sort of faded into the background. I'm worried about that. You know, I'm worried that they are going to do something completely you know what,
Yeah.
In an attempt to win this war. And they've already essentially been kind of letting us in on that by saying, in effect, that Iran having a nuclear weapon constitutes an existential threat to the rest of the world. Well, if it constitutes an existential threat to the rest of the world, then you can see how it would justify using nuclear weapons against them preemptively, right?
Yeah, exactly. This coming from the regime that has nuclear weapons that are an existential threat to everybody in their region, right?
There's that. And, just the fact that it just seems that they can't get their job done using conventional weapons.
Yeah. And that's where my spark of worry starts. Exactly.
Yes.
Because if they think that they're not going to be able to get the regime change they wanted through all these different machinations they've tried last year, and then the economic stuff, and then bringing those guys in like the Kurds, or giving the Starlink links to the Mossad connected people back in January and February, if they can't do it then if they're going to go to this war of attrition, and they know that logistically speaking, it's not like the Roman Empire could stick around in places that were, so much further north from Gaul. They stopped at a certain point and they built Hadrian's Wall, and then they pulled back because they couldn't stay in these areas where the local people were working for their own sake, and they couldn't stay. All these empires eventually retract. It's like you drop a big stone into a pond, it makes a bunch of ripples, and eventually they all come back. And that's it. And it all calms down. And this is exactly what's going on. They've expended the energy, and they can't keep the energy going because we're their batteries, and it's not going to work politically or economically. And they don't have the fuel. They don't have the weapons. They don't have anything. And the Iranians live there. It's not like they're going away.
Yep. There's two facets to this that I think are interesting, and the first is that Trump could just essentially declare victory and let the Iranians, just accept. You don't have to come out and like grovel and publicly say, yeah, the Iranians won. Just let them control the strait. It sucks. I get it. He doesn't like it, but it is what it is. And try to minimize the damage. That's one thing. The other thing is, there's this line of argument that Trump's long-term goal in doing this, which began with the Venezuela operation, was to kind of corner China, to undermine the Chinese. The Chinese have reacted very intelligently to this. I am by far not a huge fan of the electric vehicle, but what the Chinese did when all this stuff began to happen and the supply of oil began to get curtailed a little bit, they just amped up their electric grid, which they've got plenty of. We don't have it.
They've got the coal to generate. They've got the steam power to generate. They have all those tiny plants that they made all over the place. And that's another smart thing, just as far as the logistics go there. Because if you've got a grid with all these different loci in there, you can't just hit one central area and knock out a massive amount for everybody, the way the United States grids are set up for these gigantic regions. They have all these small coal plants that generate electricity for smaller regions. So if you're going to try to knock them out, you got a carpet bomb all over the place. It doesn't work.
Which isn't going to work. And so the point is that they have quietly built up a very impressive electric infrastructure for their own country, which enables them to shift over to that, for powering their country. We can't do that as a practical matter. Now, I don't want an industrial policy. I don't want the federal government, like under the big, beautiful, the Biden's thing, the putting up of these electric charging things everywhere. But the long and short of it is that didn't happen. Yeah. So, leaving aside the discussion about whether electric cars are sensible or not, they're not practical because there's no place to charge them for most people. They're just not feasible. So we can't kind of like deal with a potential shortage of oil in the way that the Chinese can.
No way. And all of the icing and rhetoric that they're throwing out there. Remember, who was that comedian? Was it Rip Taylor? Would throw the confetti out. And he's still running around on all the game shows and stuff. He was in the last episode of the Monkees, the great Frodis caper.
Oh, that's a deep dive. I hadn't thought about him in a long time.
Yeah. But essentially, as much confetti as they want to throw out there, with all the happy days are here again, whatever. And
this egregious line, Trump. It's just the contempt that he has for the intelligence of the American people.
Yeah,
we control the strait.
I know.
Don't you bozo? What they've done is that, they control like the exit to it. Like they can do that. They can prevent things from leaving, but that's not the same thing as the straits being open, Orange Man.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like the scrawny kid in school telling you that he beat up the biggest kid plus the other big kids all on one night after a school dance. And everybody knows that he didn't do it, and he keeps saying it. It's just insufferable. And it just so, and this is the thing though. So they have all this lineup of this rogues gallery of people coming out with these statements, and they're offensively fake, whether it's Besant or it's the energy secretary, Wright, whatever it might be. They come out with these statements, and nobody can believe these things. The data is very clear. And then, as you said, they come out with these nonsense statements about pipelines, and you added that extra dimension. I was just talking about the fluid dynamics of the oil, because they can't. First, they haven't built enough piping to be able to put through what they've been saying they've been putting through. They just don't have it. And second, if they were trying to build the piping, that would make it vulnerable. And third, the piping requires that it has to be done a certain way because it can't get too hot. So it's not like they can just suddenly dig underground and have a piping system where the stuff that goes through there won't be building up friction and creating a lot of heat. They have to have an engineering system that supports the pipeline thing. And nobody, it's like they think they can say these things to these people. Anybody who's lived near a pipeline or knows anything about the way pipelines work knows that you can't do it like that. So why do they even say these things? I don't understand. Who do they think they're fooling? I guess they are fooling a bunch of people who watch Fox. I don't know.
I don't know. As a guy who likes to read about history, I love reading about the Hitler rants. When his generals would come to him and say, "Mein Führer," and they would point out how they simply didn't have the necessary equipment. They didn't have the ability to keep the troops supplied and fed. And it's my unshakable will. All you need is to have will.
Yeah. Yeah. And he'll shoot the people who bring the bad news like the Soviets would do, right?
It's like a refusal to acknowledge inconvenient truths, just simple facts about what can and can't be realistically done.
Yeah. So where do you think it's going to go? Because, and it's I haven't really gotten to speak to anybody. I've texted a couple people, Eric, but you're the first person I've actually spoken to about this. And, listening to Gerald Celente and David today on David's show, Gerald is of the mind that sort of echoes what I'm thinking, is that within a few months, there's just no way the United States economy can maintain this, and the energy supplies aren't going to be there. So something drastic is going to happen. And I think we're already starting to see it with the bond market and the collapse of the yen. I think that's the first step, and it's a bad downhill walk from there. It's going to collapse.
And the thing that really worries me the most is the effect on agriculture of diesel shortages. And and things that are necessary prerequisites to producing food in the modern era. All the chemicals and so on that are necessary to do that on a mass scale that we become dependent on. And if there is a glitch in that system, and the food production goes down by even 10%, you can imagine what an effect that's going to have on everything.
That's a really good point. And the other thing about this is, again, the centralization problem. That leads us to some great lessons about corporatism, special interests, rent seeking, and the ways that in a place that is called the land of the free, right, Eric? We have a centralized, even though they think it's decentralized, we have a centralized food regulatory system. We've got a government with its thumb over the fertilizer supply and the natural gas supply to create things like bentonite and all sorts of things. Just all the very basic delivery system for the the on-call delivery system. It's all under a central planned authority, and it has grown even worse because of the gaming by corporations, which says, well, if they're going to have this authority, I'll make sure the authority smiles on me, right?
Sure. Yeah, all of this is potentially disastrous because it's so fragile inherently. As opposed to, say, a decentralized system where you had within a community local farms, that were doing it on a smaller scale and providing locally for the community. Right. That's something that's much more protected and insulated from shocks that come from on high, from the top down.
Just to bring this up as a quick aside, Eric, sort of throw this in, but, I've obviously done tons and tons and tons of writing on the immigration stuff, for, I don't know how many articles I've written on, probably hundreds of them. Right. And the thing that really started to get me was the way that the Trumpers, not only are they ready to be ignorant about the fact that the immigration thing's supposed to be a state issue and all that stuff, but they're literally applauding a complete fake out, which is they think that foreign truck drivers are more dangerous than domestic truck drivers. And anybody who takes even a scintilla, like 5 or 10 minutes to do the research, will discover it's the exact opposite. Foreign truck drivers are not more dangerous than domestic truck drivers. Foreign truck drivers are safer than domestic truck drivers by a factor of 10 times. I was stunned.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
My thing about that topic is I hate the way independent owner operators have been inserted like so many other professions.
Exactly.
And forced to work for these big corporations because they can't afford to operate their own independent rigs anymore.
Right. And that's exactly, because that's where I wanted to go, because you can see the different hurdles and impediments, the different layers of weight that have been laid down upon the indie truckers to get to the point where the large corporations, those that still exist and haven't declared bankruptcy like Yellow Trucking did last year or the year before, the ones that still exist, the only ways that they can get past the U.S. regulations that have been foisted on them and the truckers themselves, and you can't use glider kits. You can only be on the road for X amount of hours before you have to pull off. And we're going to be able to tell based on the sensors that we put on the trucks how fast you were going. So we'll know whether you pulled over or you didn't pull over and you kept driving. We'll know, and then we'll fine you. Yeah. All those things destroyed the independent truckers, right? Yeah. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to hire less expensive foreign truckers. So this is the thing. You got Trump, who's not correcting many of the problems of the Biden administration and the Obama administration on trucking. And it goes even further back than that. It goes back to Jimmy Carter. So all these dumb things that they've done to truckers, they're not correcting them. And then when you're talking about the supply chain, people will be blind to their favorite president, who's figuratively stabbing them in the back, saying, oh, we're going to make the highway safer. Now, the Trump administration just last week said, well, we don't have enough truckers. Well, why don't you have enough truckers? Because you got rid of the truckers. You got rid of 20,000 truckers. Yeah. So what are they doing? They're using the Veterans Administration to incentivize veterans, some of whom are people with PTSD or are missing limbs, to go work in trucking.
Right. Yeah, they make it a desperate. What they've done is to push out the kind of people you actually want behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. Independent people, competent people. If you're an independent, competent person, you don't like being micromanaged and treated like an idiot child, which is the way they treat you now. If you're a trucker, you're on camera all the time. Imagine that you're out on the road. It's a hard job. You ever drive one of those things? One of those things for a shift, and you're being watched. Like a prisoner, and everything that you do behind the wheel is being tracked and recorded. Anybody who's got an option isn't going to do that. So as you say, they tend to attract people who are just desperate for money and are willing to put up with it. And so you get those lower caliber kind of people, unfortunately, in those roles.
Yeah, and then again, the narrative, the fake fantasy pixie dust narrative, that literally, if you were to walk down a street somewhere and ask any 10 Fox News viewers, or even many other people, are foreigners safe on the roads? Is there a federal purview to stop foreign truckers? They would say no to the first and yes to the second. And it's the exact opposite. It's like, where does the federal government get off licensing anything?
Yeah,
I didn't see that. Is that somewhere in, Article 93 that I missed? I don't know.
Absolutely.
And, okay, so
I harp on this with regard just to regular driving, but it is, I think, axiomatic and self-evident that individuals have varying abilities. So a guy who's extremely fit, let's say, and alert, he may be the kind of guy who can spend 8 hours straight behind the wheel of a vehicle and still be okay. Yeah. Then there are people who, they're diabetic, they're hypertensive, they're not in particularly good shape. And after 4 hours behind the wheel, they're really starting to drag, right?
Yeah.
But we have this one size fits all standard for people. So even though there's a guy who might be perfectly capable of continuing to drive and making, completing his route, getting the cargo to the dock, he has to stop. Because if he keeps on going, he's violated the rules, and he'll get fired, or he'll get, hutted by the cops because he's on the road for 15 minutes longer than they say. No individual discretion. This is the part that I think enrages so many people. It enrages me. This taking away of our agency, of our, as adults, as intelligent people, evaluating, well, should I do this or should I not do that? Am I competent to do it or am I not? These decisions are taken away from us by these remote bureaucracies, not even any particular individual, just a bureaucracy. You're prostrate before these bureaucracies that just issue these rules. Who wants to deal with that unless you absolutely have to? So people just tend to opt out of dealing with it.
Oh, it's incredible. And as the entire collectivist mentality comes from fear, or lack of respect for one's neighbor, lack of respect for his rights, but also a general buildup by the politicians and the rhetoricians and the propagandists to say, oh, no, your neighbor is really not bright enough to handle his own life. So we're going to combine to help manage that person's life for him. So it's very assumptive, it's very hubristic, and of course it undercuts and doesn't work in any sort of a natural way for all people, because that person can say the exact same thing about me.
Notice nobody ever actually stops to think and ask, well, how are things in the past, before, when we did things differently, the way you and I would have them, at least more in alignment with that. It doesn't seem like there was a big problem with trucking in the 70s and the 80s, I mean, because they were competent, highly professional guys for the most part. Sure, every once in a while there was an accident, but those dudes generally knew what they were doing, and they got the job done. Things worked. How come things don't work now? We've got more and more regulation, more and more oversight, more and more cameras and microphones everywhere, and things are falling apart. And did you see a connection there?
Yeah, exactly. It's now you got me thinking of Convoy and Chris Christopherson. Boy, what a talent he was. Eric, let's hit this story that I mentioned before bringing you on about P. Nielsen.
Oh yeah.
And if people have already gone to your website, they'll recognize the hut P. Nielsen thing. So let me bring this up here, because this one again gets the blood boiling. Tell us about this, and then before we go, I'm going to show you a story about the immigration police state that many people are going to think comes from a comic book. But tell us about this one about a few weeks ago.
I wish there was a case of a bad apple. Unfortunately, they've punched the bottom out of the barrel, and there are, this is just such a common thing. This is it's an awful incident, but it's not an uncommon incident. Basically, here's the deal. So a guy and his buddy were in their truck, and this has happened in Arizona near Lake Havasu, I think, and they were out driving, and they came across an open gate, and they started to go through this gate. Turns out it was some kind of a wildlife, protected wildlife area, and there was a fish and wildlife cop there who told them, hey, you're not allowed here. You have to leave. Get out of here. Well, they did. They followed his order. They didn't realize they weren't allowed to go there, apparently. So they didn't put up a fight. They didn't insist on staying. They turned around and left. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? No, this cop actually follows them for 20 minutes, apparently, until they pull into a gas station. So the guy goes in, gets some sodas, comes back, pumps gas into his truck, and this cop is there demanding his ID, threatening to arrest him. And the guy says, what's your problem, man? I mean, he's agitated. He probably should have kind of not been so agitated, but I understand why he was agitated. He's asking the cop, so what is it you're accusing me of doing? Because from his point of view, I went through a gate. What's the big whoop? I mean, at worst, maybe it's some like minor ticket thing. This cop is giving him the full felon stop, hut thing, screaming, demanding ID. And, then the guy calls him a pejorative. And at that point, the guy hits him with a taser. Now he's pumping gas. Okay.
As he's pumping gas, he did this.
Pumping gas. A taser is a high voltage electrical device, sparks and such, right? So the guy hits him with the taser, and he promptly lights on fire. And he gets pretty serious burns on his hands and his forearms. He's rolling around on the ground. And the cop disappears. P. Nielsen is this cop, and he looks like he's auditioning for the Village People. He looks like kind of a dark, evil version of the Village People cop with his bird sunglasses and everything.
Yeah,
and his ill-fitting outfit. Well, anyway, that guy, he disappeared. P. Nielsen disappears. This poor guy goes to the hospital. He gets taken to the hospital. He's there for 5 hours. Probably ends up with tens of thousands of dollars worth of medical bills. You can imagine what that's going to cost, right? And no charges were ever placed against the guy, and apparently no consequences for this P. Nielsen character, who was just able to kind of like fade away into the background, having committed an act that if you and I had done something like that, discharged a weapon at a gas station, and it totally unprovoked. I mean, you can watch the video. They're yelling at each other, but this guy, he's not like a wanted criminal, and he's not like coming at the cop. He's just arguing with him and calling him a name, and somehow that becomes an excuse to hit him with a taser and a gas pump.
Let's check some of this out, Eric, and I'll get this rolling just a little bit here and show some of this off. I'm just waiting for it to queue up here, and it should pop up. I'm thinking, unless it's been removed by YouTube. It's embedded, and it looks like it's going to run. It's taking a second here. Let me see if I can get over to it. Maybe it won't run. Let me see if I can go over to YouTube for it. See if it does it up on YouTube. It's not doing it up right now. I'm going to try it one more time, see if it works. Yeah, it's working. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So this will show it to us. I'll bring your volume down real quick and just show you a little bit of this wonderful, cheerful video.
A misdemeanor, asshole. It's a $10. Get out.
Watch this. A federal wildlife officer followed a man 20 minutes to a gas station, demanded his license, and then fired a taser beside a fuel pump. The man caught fire. And according to the officer's own agency, that is exactly where a taser generally should not be used.
Yeah.
You're looking at cell phone video from Clarence Coyle's point of view, capturing the tense standoff between him and an officer with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on July 16th.
And you're going to go to jail. All I'm asking for is your license right now to identify. What am I being arrested for? You are not cooperating for having committed a crime.
And that is a pretty reasonable question. The officer says Coyle committed a crime. He threatens to take him to jail. But he never actually tells him what the crime is, at least not in the footage Fox obtained. Now, if this was a lawful detention, refusing to identify yourself could create another issue. Fine. But that still doesn't answer the first question. Why was Coyle being detained in the first place?
So I want to pause it there, Eric, because one of the things that I think is important to stress here is the original concept for why cops were created, which was to stop people from injuring other people. That cop right there is the guardian of a temple. He's not guarding any human being who's being harmed. He's guarding what he thinks is this wondrous place that if you trespass in the temple, you should be punished by the temple guards. The temple being the god of the state. And that's what's going on, I think.
That and psychopathy. And obviously, this guy's not wired right. There's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
They don't do psychological screening anymore. Or if they do it to get that type of mentality into that position. A person who is looking, this is granted, it's my impression, but it seems to me that the guy was looking for an excuse. He wanted to escalate it. He could have handled this in a completely different manner. Yeah. It wasn't necessary to do any of the things that he did. So he struck me as somebody who is kind of one of these itchy people who can't stand it to be questioned. His authority was affronted, and that's actually the greatest criminal offense that you can commit in this country is contempt of cop.
That's it. Like I said, when I got punched by that cop in Boston down in Kenmore Square, it was all because I didn't move the way he wanted me to move, even though he hadn't really instructed me on how exactly I should be stepping and where I should be going. He just said move. I didn't move sufficiently, so he targeted me while there were thousands of people going crazy behind him celebrating the Red Sox, and I was just drinking a very fine lemonade walking down the street.
There's lots of poisonous synergies here. One is that it's been routinized now to dress these guys up like they're operators, like they're in the Rangers or Special Forces or something, with their what do you call it? The belts that they wear that have multiple mags and all this stuff. I mean, they look like they're getting ready to go to war. You dress like that and it's going to affect your attitude, right? Go to a Comic-Con, people dress up like Darth Vader and they start talking like Darth Vader.
Right.
It matters how you dress. It affects the way you interact with other people.
Yeah.
And then there's this idea that we're civilians. This is a really poisonous doctrine. There are civilians. They're not in the military. They may think they are. You may see a local podunk sheriff with 4-star generals on his stars on his lapel. He's not a general. He's a sheriff. Stop it. And so it's just this idea that we're two different classes or categories of people, that they're, this military SA operation kind of a thing, and we're civilians, and we're supposed to defer to, to these people, as opposed to that, we should be on an equal footing with these people.
And you reminded me that after this segment, I want to come back. I'm going to do some warfare coverage, because they've got some information that has been uncovered regarding the number of civilians that the United States killed in Iran, which is an actual undercount. So remind me not to forget that. But I also don't want to forget this other article, and I mentioned it to you in text, and there's so many articles over at your site, Eric, but I wanted to talk to you about the Mustang article.
Oh yeah, we have some fun with
Ford, that. Yeah, I like this. Should Ford make a 4-door Mustang? So this is very interesting because, as you say here, can anything with 4 doors be a Mustang? A way to answer this is to ask whether anything with 4 doors can be a Charger. It not only can, it already has. From its reboot back in 2006 through its final year prior to electrified in 2023, the modern era Charger has always been a sedan. The classic Charger of the 60s and early 70s was always a coupe. This year, 2026, the Charger is both a sedan and a coupe, and most people don't seem to mind. Well, let's talk about the Mustang. Yeah. Because in my text to you, I said, I kind of go back and forth on that. So tell us your thoughts.
Well, yeah, a lot of people who are Mustang aficionados and fans, initially their reaction is, oh God, they're polluting the brand. They're committing some kind of an atrocity. I don't think so. As long as it's not an EV, as long as it is a Mustang, meaning it's rear wheel drive and it has a V8 available. Look at what Dodge did with the Charger. Very smart. When they brought it back in 2006, it brought it back as a sedan, and it sold really well. You know why? For 2 main reasons. One, families could buy it. If you're a single guy and you want a fun toy car, you get a 2-door car, right? You don't really care about the back seats. You don't have to, they're there to throw your gym bag in. They're not there for people, let alone kids. Imagine if you have kids and you have to deal with a child seat with a 2-door car, what a hassle that is. Nobody's going to want to deal with that. The other thing, and this isn't commented on very often, but Dodge made a fortune selling fleets of Chargers to cop shops.
I remember. Yep. You see them all over the place. They paint them black and they'd be sitting there in their speed traps waiting for you.
So Dodge did 2 really stupid things after 2023. First, they turned the Charger into a battery-powered car. Disaster. The second thing was they brought it back as a coupe only initially in 2024. The electric Charger was both impractical, as an EV, and impractical as a 2-door coupe. Yep. Really dumb. So, they really quickly tried to correct that mistake by putting an engine in the Charger, first of all, and also offering both versions, the sedan and the coupe. That's what's available right now. Really smart. It lets people get either one depending on what their needs are. So I think that if Ford were to do that, it would be very smart. The Mustang right now is not doing very well because the Mustang has become not just an impractical car, as it always has been, but an expensive car.
Yeah.
So there's a problem with that because in this economy, not many people have the money to be able to buy the toy car, in addition to the practical car, to have that fun car that they just keep around for when they have, when they don't have to worry about the kids and they just want to, go for a drive. What they need is an, all-in-one kind of a car. And I think a 4-door Mustang could do that. And more importantly, and as a fan of the Mustang myself, it could save the Mustang. If Ford makes money on this deal, selling both kinds of the cars, why would you be opposed to that? It keeps the coupe available. You don't have to buy the sedan if you don't want to, but the fact that other people do means you'll have the option to buy the coupe.
Oh boy. Yeah. If I had the money and I had a family, I would love to get a Mustang and take the kids for a ride. That'd be wonderful. It'd be absolutely fantastic. And, forget the stupid Mustang that they tried to push on people.
Yeah. Now that's the thing. Yeah. Like a lot of people's initial reaction, or they brought up the Mach-E.
Yeah.
That's not a Mustang. Okay. And it's not so much because it's a 5-door crossover.
Right.
It's an EV.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, without an engine, without a beating heart, it's not a Mustang. And that's the problem with the Mach-E. And the Mach-E, just like the electric Charger, even kind of in a roundabout way admitted that, it comes with a soundtrack that plays the sounds while you're driving of a real Mustang, which is so sad and pathetic. Like they can't even own that it's an EV. Why not just let it make its own EV whirring sounds as opposed to piping in the canned recorded songs of the V8 that's not there?
It's just so stupid. It's just, oh man. Can you imagine like being in the boardroom and being the only person who's sitting there going like, does anybody else think this is really dumb?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is a
the
bad
other
idea.
thing I wanted to mention too, Ford lost the cop car market.
Yeah.
To Dodge when it discontinued the Crown Victoria. Remember, the Crown Vic used to be the cop car of choice.
Late 911. Where's the late Crown? Absolutely.
And they canceled the Crown Vic in 2011. So since that time, cops generally, when they buy Ford vehicles, they buy Ford Explorers. I've talked to cops; they don't like it, and I get it. The Explorer is not the greatest handling vehicle. It's an SUV.
No, rides high. It's rough.
They love the Charger. The Charger, and they love the Crown Vic. Those are big, posh, comfortable cars, and they work for cop duty because you got a back seat, throw the perp in the back. So Ford could recover some of the fleet sales that it gave away. So that's the other aspect of this that makes it, in my opinion, a really smart business move for Ford to go ahead and bring out a sedan version of the Mustang.
Oh, it'd be really cool, man. Between the Mustang and the Miatas, I like the Chargers. I always thought those were cool. I used to like the Roadrunners and Chevelle SSs, going back a little further and stuff like that. And shoot, I remember even trying to turn the starter on the early models Fords, because my dad, they would have shows. And my dad was like, oh yeah, those are the cars we had, Model T and stuff like that. And I've always admired the technology behind just basic cars. And especially when I get to talk to you, Eric, and I see what they're doing with the electronics. It's like, no, this is like, you want an engine, you want a thing that's put on a frame, and then you drive it. That's what I want. I don't want all this weird pressing buttons and stuff that can go wrong. I got enough problems with my computer when I do it.
Would a toothbrush be improved with a touchscreen?
Nah.
Right. I mean, do you need some kind of a dispensing machine to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush?
Yeah, exactly.
There's certain things that basically have reached the apotheosis of design excellence. They don't need. This is like it's like this paradox that some engineers feel that they have to keep trying to figure out a different way to do something that is done very well to begin.
Yeah. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Exactly.
On off. The other thing, switch. I mean, you really can't do better than that.
I was thinking, Eric, a buddy of mine he and his dad used to fix up old MGs. And so I was in high school and Jeff was in my English class. We had this teacher. She was the worst teacher of all. She was terrible. And so Jeff had fixed up this MG and he had a parking permit. We were seniors and we all look outside. His car was parked just, like 25, maybe 35 feet away from the side of the building, parallel parked to the side of the building, and it's on fire. It's smoldering. And we're like, and she's all like, her classic line, like treating us like 5-year-olds, is like, it's not a big red fire truck, Gardner. So she says that to me, and I was like, yeah, actually, you might want to call one. The car's on fire. She's like, oh, and Jeff's in the class. I'm like, Jeff, your car's on fire. And I would never forget being over at his place. He's got the parts out and all this stuff, and you can see him. It's a basic machine, and obviously there was a problem with the battery there with that, so they took care of it and stuff. And I just like that basic stuff. Like, if I could, I would love to get a Lotus and just mess with a Lotus, super low to the ground, put the goggles on, and just go, that'd be awesome.
You can get, they're called Caterham 7s. And there's a couple of companies that make the kit, and it's kind of cool. You can just buy the kit and, put it together in your garage, and it's simple, really simple. And if you have some basic mechanical aptitude, you could definitely put one of those things together.
I know I can look it up, but do you have any idea? I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you have any idea how much those things cost?
Depends, because they offer the kits in various states. Like you can go for the very basic, and you can go for one that's basically got everything, including the engine. You don't necessarily have to buy the engine and the transmission from that supplier at that time. You can put your own in whenever you want to. So it really depends on what your budget and your preferences are.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm in no position to do that yet, but maybe someday when I get my 2 hectares of land over in Siberia, I'll invite you over. We'll drive, man. We'll drive. We'll put it together.
Yep.
All right, Eric, we better get running, but I thank you so much for keeping me sane. I got my Ba hat all ready right here as I clunk everything. And it's
I got to get my red one, my updated one that has the the MAGA red with the sheep on it.
You got it. I want to go over to the store and check it out. Actually, I want to go over to the Eric Peters store. The gear, man. All right, here we go. This is it.
By the way, I know we're running tight on time, but if you ever needed any more proof as to Trump's real nature, I submit for your consideration the fact that he just installed Erica Schwartz as head of the CDC.
Oh, and it's funny. I was talking about that on Monday, and I didn't actually show her picture or the video of her talking about how important the jabs were and how much she loves mRNA. I mean, it's the perfect example of just how much MAGA people are willing to let him sell out, and they still lick his butt. It's just
I don't mind her so much, but I do mind Trump. Trump could have picked somebody else, somebody who wasn't a pusher of these drugs, but he chose her, which tells me that he's just all in on the pushing of the drug. Obviously, he was. Go back and look at what went on during 2020. So, I'm not particularly religious, but what that's saying about, you'll know them by their fruit. There you go. Here's some fruit for you. Take a bite.
That's a great, great point. Well, now you got me thinking of Lindsey Graham, but sorry. But anyway. Hey, listen, I hope I can inspire 2, 3, 4, 5 people to go over now, ericpetersautos.com, and hit the shop and get that hat, because that looks awesome. I love that. It looks super, super cool. What a great idea with the sheep, MAGA. Eric, you're very creative, dude. It's just awesome. I love it. And I've got to start up a store for Liberty Conspiracy. So I made a design that one of them that says spreading the Russian propaganda since 2022 with the classic, Russian thing. I'm going to do a few other ones too. And I'm actually thinking of maybe doing a silhouette of Vladimir Putin or something like that. Or, I'll try to figure it out, a play on the hammer and sickle. I don't know what it'll be, but listen, thanks, man. You keep me sane. It's been an awesome, awesome night. And I hope that, I know a lot of people are going down to that Ron Paul conference, and there's going to be a lot of people there. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be great if we could all get together at something like that? But I'll see you soon, man. I'll try to make it out your way somehow. If teleportation doesn't exist, I'll drive my Lotus. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, amigo.
You got it, man. Live long and prosper, brother. What's the thing? This thing. That's it.
One.
Yes.
Please.
See you later,
Dr. Severin, right?
Yes. Rock on. Peace, love, togetherness, as Sammy Davis Jr. would say. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks,
man. So funny. Take care, man.